Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and I'm very excited. This week, my guest is Graham Bell. Um, First became familiar with Graham during the first Anafight Underground show, and just really enjoyed his look and the kind of the sort of objects he would use in his match. And I was just really enamored with this character and went to look him up, and I was even more taken just in awe, I guess I should say. Just a really interesting character, especially wrestling on the independent scene, and becoming more and more of a fan of his. But Graham, how you been?
I've been real good, man. How about you?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
I'm glad to, man. I've been on a little streak of doing like podcasts and interviews lately.
I'm glad to keep the streak going. um, my first question is my standard question to all the wrestlers that come on the show. Were you a fan of pro wrestling growing up, and what got you interested in pro wrestling?
Absolutely. I was 5 years old in 1997, so I was prime age for the Attitude Era and all that stuff. I remember I lost my recess privileges for 2 weeks at school because I wrote "suck it" in sidewalk chalk
That's
during recess.
awesome.
And big old letters on the concrete basketball court they had out there. But I got into it through my brother because the Christmas that I turned 5, my brother's like 9 years older than me, and he had been into it when he was younger, like before I really could remember. But my mom got us a PlayStation 1 for Christmas, and one of the games she got with it was WWF In Your House. And that was my first introduction to a lot of the characters. And I don't know if you ever played that game.
Oh yeah,
It's a
I
hell
played
of
in your
a game.
house. It's
It's
it's an interesting one, that's for sure.
it's fantastic. To this day, like the way the announcer would say Ahmed Johnson in that game, I would select like 4 Ahmed Johnsons just so I could hear the announcer go, coming to the ring, Ahmed Johnson versus Ahmed Johnson. Like just,
Now, see,
but
I was the opposite. I
we,
always liked when Vince was introducing because he was always just like he was like in shock when you picked Bret Hart. Like I'm like Bret was not my favorite wrestler, but I'd want to pick Bret just because I hear Vince go Bret Hart really loudly on that game.
that would have been peak time too around 97 when Brett was just not on Vince's great side. See, I don't. Maybe they both had it. I liked Owen in that game better because you could shoot the playing cards
Yes.
at your opponents with Owen. I think Undertaker was my favorite in the game though because you'd throw punches and like ectoplasm and bats would trail behind your strikes.
Very, very interesting. It's kind of it's not considered one of those games like the gamers like, but like it's the best. Like you got all your buddies over and you've been drinking and you want to waste a couple hours. That's
I
the
think it's
perfect
the
game.
best. I think it's the best wrestling like arcade style game out there because that's totally what it was.
Right? Yeah. Did you ever play the predecessor, WrestleMania, the arcade game, or no?
Man, I've been to a few arcades that like had like a cabinet of it, but not. I didn't get to play it like a lot.
Okay, but go on. We went off on a big tangent about in your house, but so
No,
so you
but
got the
anyway,
game, yeah.
yeah, and that was my first really introduction to a lot of those guys. And me and my brother played it a lot, and his friends would come over and play. And one day he just asked me if I wanted to watch it on TV, and the rest is pretty much history from there. I was totally enraptured by it from day one. And I remember specifically, it could have only been like a few months into watching it. Like we were doing something at school where you had to like tell the teachers what you wanted to be when you grow up. And again, I'm 5 years old. And I had no idea at the time. And I was watching it with my brother. I was watching Raw, and Stone Cold had a random ass match against D'Lo Brown. And I remember it was kick, stunner, everyone on hard cam side stands up. And I was just like, hey, I could do this. I think I'll do this when I grow up. And then I
Awesome.
never changed my mind.
Awesome. So you, from an early age, you were focused on becoming a pro wrestler. Where there wasn't like kind of the I want to play football or I want to be a fireman or an astronaut or a police officer or you
When I
know.
was in middle school and high school, I got real into stand-up comedy
Okay.
and late night talk shows. And even like other stuff here and there, like I thought like being a teacher might be cool when I was younger, but like it was always all secondary to wrestling. It was like,
Awesome.
can I do stand up and wrestle? Can I be a late night talk show host and a wrestler? Like shit like that. But it was always wrestling first.
Awesome. So, I mean, you mentioned that you're a big Stone Cold fan. What up? And you like DX to a point. If you're writing "Suck It" with the sidewalk chalk at school, were those kind of your two favorites, or who were some of your favorite wrestlers as you were growing up?
I'd say Stone Cold was my first favorite. DX was probably, if nothing else, my favorite in concept because I
Right.
mean they really embodied just the late '90s. Like as far as like we're not gonna do what you tell us to.
Right.
Like that was, and I don't know what it was like that really. I mean, everyone's attracted to the counterculture slash like bad boy rebels, but like I've always been from just being a little kid who did fairly well in school as far as not getting in trouble for the most part. Like I didn't have any real reason to idolize rebels as much as I did, but DX, especially X Pac, I was a big X Pac kid because
Really.
he was the mouthy little one that could like kick
Right.
the shit out, and he's still a hell of a worker.
Oh yeah.
And like, and I was one of the smaller kids in my class, so I liked that X Pac was like the shitty little mouthy guy that could go out and do the cool kicks, and he wore his sunglasses inside and had dope leather jackets and X
Re-
Pac. That
really like when he's
that
tag team
era,
with
X
Kane.
Pac
That
was
was so
easily my
cool.
favorite DX guy.
Okay.
But my overall favorite, my favorite to this day until the day I die, once I really start watching, is Goldberg.
Very interesting. I mean, I know I'm not gonna knock anybody that likes Goldberg. Goldberg, I loved him as a kid, but like I guess it's one of those. As I grew up, I just started liking other people a lot more than Goldberg, and I'm not trying to
I mean,
knock
it
Goldberg, but
makes
yeah,
it makes no sense that Goldberg's still my favorite. We have almost nothing in common aside from the fact that I spear the shit out of people. But man, like I'm very much a work rate guy. You've seen my stuff at Anna. Like I'm not trying to go in there and have a short day. Like I'm
right.
I'm there to fucking work. And and Goldberg's definitely not that. I've always told people it's funny. I've grown up since I was a kid in large part because of him wanting to be a wrestler and wanting to be the very best professional wrestler and just kind of living and dying by professional wrestling. And he's the exact opposite. He lucked into a situation. He's not trying to have 5-star matches. He's trying to get his paycheck and like be a role model is about as far as he aspires, but he doesn't have that love for the business that I do. But
Right.
it's that rule that your favorite wrestler when you're 5 years old is your favorite wrestler forever. Like
That's very true. That is
if
very
I had to
true.
pick one, if I had to watch one wrestler's matches the rest of my life, it wouldn't be Goldberg's matches, but like he's always going to be the guy for me. He
That's
was
fair.
he was unbeaten when I was a kid, and by default, he was the best. So I went with the best.
So, okay, you mentioned you were the Goldberg fan. Now, whenever you were in grade school, did you have the arguments with the Stone Cold kids? Like I think everybody kind of had at that point in the late '90s. If you like Goldberg, the Stone Cold fans were like, well, if he ever came to the WWF, Stone Cold kick his butt, and if
Right,
Stone
man.
Cold ever came to WCW, Goldberg kick his butt.
I probably would have if there had been any other wrestling fans at my school. But I
No
was,
other wrestling fans in your school.
man, like my friend Steven would watch it sometimes, but he was very casual. Like he liked The Rock and stuff. And I was a WWF guy, but also like a Goldberg guy overall. But
Right.
always, but yeah, my friend Steven would watch little. My brother watched, and some of his friends kept up with it. But again, he's 9 years older than me. They're not trying to hang out and have these discussions. Like they know it's a
Right.
work, and I'm still over there fucking about to have a heart attack every time someone cheats in a Goldberg match because thinking this might be it. Um, but yeah, I was really the only kid in my school that liked wrestling.
That that sucks because I don't know if I would have survived childhood without my wrestling friends to talk wrestling with. But so it's kind of interesting you say you were a Goldberg fan because there's I mean I like Goldberg too, but there kind of became that point where I'm like okay, I don't hate Goldberg, but like, oh, here's these. You start seeing the work rate more. And I grew up, my
For
favorite
sure.
wrestler was Shawn Michaels, and I always just liked Shawn Michaels because he did cool stuff. But like,
He's a top 5 for me all time. I didn't
right,
appreciate him as much as I could have when I was younger, but
right.
looking back now, absolutely.
But like, there kind of became that point in time where eventually you're like, oh, hey, I like. You kind of become aware of the internet. Did you have that sort of thing, or were you just always kind of the good guys, bad guys, Goldberg, and did you ever have kind of
I
that whole
was
where you became aware of like the community at large of wrestling and broaden the horizon, broaden your like interests in it?
I guess my first real kind of any experience with a broader community was probably like early high school, like a year or two after I'd kind of come to terms with the fact that it was a work, which was later than it should have been. But like I lived in denial for a while about it. Um, but I used to, because Harley Race's school used to operate about an hour and a half from where I lived, and I would get on the message boards on his site, which was cool because Trevor Murdoch would hop on there occasionally and stuff. But that was like I'd hear people talk about, and like I don't even know how I knew about it because I wasn't a message board kid and
Right,
I didn't search a lot, but I definitely heard the name ROH and like knew that independence existed on some level. I think even as a kid, I just kind of assumed that there had to be smaller wrestling companies out there, you know.
right,
But I don't know, like I didn't have really the resources because when I was in high school, it was before streaming for free
right.
was like really a thing, and there's only so much on YouTube because like even in my high school years, like ROH was still kind of like at the tail end of that first glory days that it had, you know, like they still
Right.
had a lot of their guys.
And ROH, especially at that point in time, they lived and died by their DVD sales. So if you put their big match on YouTube, well, that's a $20 DVD they're not going to sell, and that's a big deal for them.
Yeah, 100%. So like I would catch clips of like Pelly Primo versus Roderick Strong when Roderick was still chunky, and like I guess really what it probably was, and I'm glad you asked because I hadn't thought about it in a while, is I started getting PWIs from my
Okay.
dad because I mean it was a wrestling magazine, and then that's when I would hear names like Nigel McGuinness and Brian Danielson and Kevin Steen and El Generico, and it occurred to me like how out of the loop I was like the first time I watched Brian Danielson wrestle, and he didn't have a British accent, and that threw me off because when you look at like the 2006 to 9 Brian Danielson where he's got like his shaved head and he's all pasty,
Right.
I'd only ever seen pictures of him, and I kind of just assumed I was like that guy looks like he has a British accent for sure.
Right.
So,
Um.
but that was so I guess PWI, and then weirdly enough I started uh playing on some e-feds when I was in high school, and that's when I got introduced to that really toxic side of the wrestling fandom for the first
Yeah.
time.
It's fun. I love being part of like the internet wrestling community because you meet so many good people and you make so many good friends, and then there's that one day where you post that one controversial opinion, or you say that one thing that you don't think is a big deal, and then turns
Yeah.
out there's like a horde of people that are like, I can't believe you think that. What are you, stupid? And then you're just like, oh god.
Oh man, I would write articles for this one website, and it got to the point where like I would do these ones that it was just like random thoughts like, man, it's crazy that Dusty Rhodes was so fat and Cody Rhodes is extra skinny. Isn't that just like weird observations?
Right.
And I would have so many people jump on there and just like jump my ass for non-opinions even. Like I put Goldberg, like things like Goldberg's my favorite, and then it's like you're fucking stupid because his matches fucking suck. If you go back and watch them, they're all the goddamn same thing. And I'm just like, I'm not asking you to like Goldberg. I'm just saying I like
Right.
Goldberg.
I always joke. It's like anytime I say I have my weekly live stream that Cody Rhodes did something good, I'm like, I'm prepared for an unsubscribe. If some once I say like, oh yeah, Cody Rhodes did good this week, nope. But kind of going back a little bit, you mentioned kindergarten. You had said you wanted to be a wrestler. You kind of always had these dreams of like teaching or entertaining. So not knowing about what your middle school and your high school had to offer, did you try to get a background in performing to help you with that? Did you try to get like an athletic background? Did you play sports? Part of any bands, part of any drama club or anything that was offered, or was it just kind of like,
Man, not really. I did drama in high school, and I did that for fun because until I got into wrestling, even though I kind of knew it as like a logical fact, I never looked at wrestling as performing. Like I
right,
knew it wasn't an athletic competition in the traditional sense, but I didn't look at it as performing. It's weird. Like I looked at wrestling as wrestling. It's really hard to, and in a sense, I still do. I don't know. I'm one of those guys. If you're just hanging out with me or having a conversation or in the car, like I've got a fair amount of charisma. I'm a funny dude and I'm really good on my feet.
right,
But when it comes to like, hey, I need to be the center of attention, look at me type of performer that you kind of need to be like a main eventer a lot of times, I don't have that kind of like jock charisma to like
gotcha.
just go out there. Like I'll always be self-conscious in the ring to some extent, even if I'm supremely confident. Like I'll always be just a touch self-conscious.
So what made you decide to finally go all in on being a wrestler? What school did you decide to train at? How'd you find out about the school? Take me through your journey to committing to professional wrestling.
Man, I committed when I was 5 years old. Like there was never any question after that. Like all of high school was just me waiting to be done with it so I could start wrestling. Um, that's why I didn't do any like the A+ programs or any of the college credit courses because I was like, well, I'm not going to go to college because I'm going to wrestle.
No,
And a less awesome decision in retrospect, but ultimately I think it was for the best. But I was going to train at Harley Racing School. Um, I mean, it's hard to find better pedigree than that.
right,
And but his tuition was $3,000, and I had a really hard time finding work in high school and out of high school. I grew up in a really small town, and then I moved to a really big city with no work experience. So finding uh not even consistent work, just finding work that would hire 18-year-old me with no work experience was really tough. Even like temp stuff was hard to find.
right.
And I found some stuff here and there, and I think I saved up about $1,000 about a little less than a year after I graduated high school. And I was just like, this isn't working. I will fucking kill myself if I have to wait any longer to go. And so I started looking up other schools, and I couldn't find anything. Anything that was remotely affordable was way too far away. Like I would have had to relocate. I didn't have the money for that because my dad was letting me live rent free at his place.
Right.
And all the other places close by, I couldn't afford. The tuitions were too high. So I just about given up before I found an advertisement on a local wrestling news site that advertised the Rings and Cages Training Center. And they didn't really have any info aside from contact info. So I called, and this guy, Chad Sullivan, answered, and he told me that they're going to start doing classes with, I think it was only like a $200 down payment and $100 a month after that,
Okay.
which is incredibly cheap. And then you pay on a monthly basis, and you had to pass their tryout, which was just a big, blow up session. And so it was about 2.5 hours from my house. I'd go every Sunday after I passed the tryout. I paid for it with money I got from doing a medical research study. That gave me like $1,200. And I trained for about 4 weeks before I had my first match. And then that would have been, I started basically the last weekend of May, the first weekend of June. And then Chad had to quit training people around September because his business got too busy. because he builds MMA cages and wrestling rings. And we trained out of his workshop. But he got so busy, he couldn't leave a ring set up. So me and my tag partner, my best friend, Luke, were kind of just sent out into the wrestling world on our own after about 3 months of once a week training.
Okay, very well. What was the training like? Because you mentioned you didn't really have the athletic background. Was it like a culture shock? Kind of being put through that, or did you take to it naturally? Was it something?
It wasn't a shock at all. I didn't do sports in high school, but I'm hella athletic and I always was. And I didn't bother to do any sports in high school. We didn't have football or wrestling. I had no interest in basketball and I hated everyone on the baseball team. So I was like, well, fuck this. Um, I did a little bit of taekwondo in like elementary and middle school. But once my mom started teaching the class when she got her black belt, it became a lot less fun. But like from my freshman year up through my senior year, I worked out 5 days a week, pretty much every week for 4 years. And like, I don't know, I was always just a run and jump outside kid. Like I was definitely inside with my video games and stuff, but I'd go over to my neighbor's house and we'd spend all day on his trampoline. So like bumping, I knew it was going to be rough and I knew it was going to kick my ass, but like I was I was ready for it, as ready as you can be. So I wouldn't call it a shock, but it was pretty, the blow up, the tryout itself was pretty standard. Having us just do cardio stuff until we couldn't hardly move.
Right.
And training after that, I wish it'd been more cardio stuff. Because my cardio is trash naturally. Like that's genetic even. But he had us do really basic in-ring stuff. He taught us how to bump and he taught us some basic holds, and that's really about it. We didn't get really anything in the way of functional psychology, didn't get much in the way of high level grappling. He taught us, it ended up being like the bare minimum, and it wasn't anything malicious. He wasn't a scam artist. It's just he was a guy who wasn't totally equipped to train guys, and I wasn't really in any position to know that.
Right.
So, but what he taught us to do right, and he taught us to do safe. He just really didn't teach us a lot.
So you mentioned didn't get to a lot, and after like 3 months of training, you were pretty much on your own in the wrestling business. What is it like? Was that a shock? Like, what do I do here? Like, we're on our own. Like, I need to learn more. Was there kind of that sort of thing, or were you kind of confident in yourself and confident that you could pick up, you know, what else you needed to
Well,
learn through your bookings, or what was going
I'd
through your head
always
at that point?
I'd always read from like articles and interviews that you did most of your learning in the car and on the road anyway. So like I knew when I had my first match, I probably shouldn't have been having my first match. And I knew 3 months of training wasn't long enough for me to be a complete wrestler. But I figured like, well, I'll go and I'll get bookings when and where I can. And I was very confident in my abilities and still am. But we did have one connection. The guy that trained us had taken us to a show in Arkansas. And from there, we made some connections to Oklahoma. And like we kept working that Arkansas show for years, like would turn down bookings to like get paid $20 if that, because that was like the first place that booked us.
Right.
Um, but really we spent a lot of time, because I was a tag team wrestler for the first half of my career. And we spent a lot of time in Oklahoma because that's just kind of where we had any kind of connections at all. Oklahoma is a very insular wrestling community. It's not a very good one at all. There's no vets there and nobody travels. So it's a little bit of a black hole, but for the level we were at when we first got there, we were working people who had a few years experience on us, but were light years behind us as far as in-ring ability and just common sense in wrestling. Like we hadn't sharpened our psychology tool belt, and we're still for the most part only doing basic moves, but there were some guys who you questioned if they had ever watched wrestling before. Like they're like I knew what a suplex was supposed to look like since I was 5 years old.
Right.
And there were guys here who couldn't figure out, do I put his arm around my neck? Do it like stuff like that. So we got as a tool that serves me well to this day is me and Luke got really good at working. I guess you'd call it working down to people's level. We got really good at having good matches, getting good matches out of bad wrestlers.
Okay.
Which as an independent wrestler, it's a skill you need to have, because if you're not on a contracted roster, there's no guarantee the guy standing across from you knows what the fuck he's doing.
Right.
And so we kind of just did that. We were two young athletic guys that came into a dead wrestling scene. And as a tag team, especially, we just kind of walked into the state and we're like, here we are, the best ones here. But not that the bar was super high at the time, but I mean, that's how it was. And so we basically made the rounds working all the Oklahoma promotions, getting tag titles there, until eventually we made our way down to Lawton, Oklahoma, which is where IZW ran, Impact Zone Wrestling. And as insular as Oklahoma was as a state, IZW was insular as a company. Not a lot of people from other promotions worked there. The owner, Johnny Z, is very abrasive and very staunch in his opinions and his views, and a lot of people can't take that. But they had far and away the best roster in the state, and a better roster than most independent companies you'll find. And they did weekly shows. So me and Luke were there 2 to 4 times a month, depending on our schedule. And they had some excellent workers there. Johnny Z, the promoter, being among them. Jermaine Johnson was one. Aaron Neal, who had worked Vader, and Vader had taken him to Japan because he was so impressed with Aaron.
Really?
Yeah. That was one thing that helped IZW out a lot early on, is they booked Vader and his son. And so a lot of those guys got to work with Vader. And
just for the record, his son was not the same guy from Boy Meets World, correct?
No, his actual son.
Okay.
But we got down there, and so that's really where we kind of took our game to the next level. It was the first chance we had to work people better than us.
Gotcha.
And so, and we kind of, even after we got to IZW, we stagnated a little bit there because we stayed there for so long. And it was really cool, though, because we got to do storylines and angles and promos and work in front of a camera, and a live audience, a weekly audience, and got to tell stories, which has always been the thing about wrestling I've loved the most. Like, I'm a work rate guy, but like work rate stuff means a lot more with a story.
Absolutely.
Going into it, stories give you more options to do things, and I could go on forever about that. But eventually, we started going up to Kansas City for Metro Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
And that was cool for a while. That, I guess, even around like the time the NWL started up, like that started to go kind of sour. Like,
right,
some of the people in management got kind of shady with us, and it was pretty clear that like the money guy that was in charge, like we weren't some of the guys that he had like picked and were like, oh, those are my guys. And if you weren't one of those guys in NWL, they could kind of give a fuck about you for the most part. And shortly after that, like I made some contacts there, and I got on the road a little bit with guys like Davey Vega. Went to Texas with him and Matt Fitchett a couple times, the Besties.
Oh yeah, big fan of the Besties here. I'm being from the Southern Illinois, St. Louis area. Besties are great.
Yeah, and fun fact, me and Luke were their first official match being billed as the Besties in the world.
Really?
They had just done the angle at AAW like the weekend before, where they like, because they like teased a breakup up there or something. I don't know the whole gimmick. but like they started like the hashtag or whatever, and then like we had a match with them in Texas that had been advertised for a long time. And I think up until that match, they'd been advertised as the Sex Bob-ombs because they had like 4 different tag names before the Besties. And that the night we went down there, like during their entrance, is when they were announced as the Besties in the world. I don't believe they had started using Savage Garden yet, but they were billed as the Besties in that match against us.
Nice. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, no, it's a fun little factoid and stuff. But
I gotta ask you before we go much further. One of the
yeah.
things that really drew me into you was your character. Were you always doing this sort of mercenary character, and kind of tapering off of that? Uh, what was your basis behind this character you have now? Because there's been Merc for hire, or I'm just wrestling for the paycheck characters in the past, but like yours is different. Yours like you remind me of like a video games are. You're like a video game character wrestler, like the character you play in a first person shooter come to the wrestling ring, and that's the vibe I got when I first saw you. And if that's off base, please tell me. But how'd you come up with the current character, and has that always been your character?
Nah, for a long time, before me and my tag partner were the Diamond Dogs, we were just the KC Wolves, and we were just 2 guys that wrestled. You know, we were
Right.
just 2 wrestlers. And it got to the point around the time that character wrestling started to get really big in independent wrestling, like even before Danhausen and Warhorse and stuff, like 4 or 5 years ago.
Right.
I talked with him. I was like, man, we need something. And I had long had in my head the vision of like just having a bazooka during my entrance.
Okay.
And I was just like, what can we do off of that? And like, I don't know if it was conscious or subconscious, but we'd gotten to the point where, because again, I'm not super good at that business side of wrestling, making contacts and hustling and being able to kind of really sell myself off of much more than like my matches.
Right.
But so we came up with the mercenary thing because that's what we would do. It's like, hey, where are we at this weekend? We're here. This town we've never been to before and we'll probably never be back to. And we're going to work their tag champions. And, we're just going around and like the kind of do the job thing, like started as a joke because we'd basically get brought in places to just put over their regulars. And so that's how like we're here to do the job got started. And
Interesting.
so I mean that's kind of where the mercenary, like the idea of that kind of came from, is that's kind of the life we were living on the indies. Was we were these mercenaries. We would go where the money was and we would do whatever you needed and we do it better than anyone else. The uh, the inspiration was very much supposed to be a Deadpool and Cable dynamic between me and
Awesome.
him.
Nice.
It's really weird because my tag partner Luke is a wonderful straight man in real life. He's got very quick, very dry, sardonic humor that very rarely misses. And I'm a very absurd, boisterous, obnoxious personality. We gel very well together, but we could never get that kind of dynamic across in like promos and stuff. I could never quite get him to be like the straight man I needed him to be. Like he would always try a little too hard to be funny himself. I was just like, just let it come. Let me try and be funny. And when it doesn't work, you'll say something shitty and it'll be funny. Like, but after a while, like, but actually to your point about like the video game stuff, like I definitely didn't want us to have like a military gimmick.
Right.
I knew like we wanted to be mercenaries, and even in drawing from comic books, originally I kind of had like a more streamlined high tech kind of thing in mind. But as you
Right.
can see, it kind of like evolve more into just kind of like a Rambo style. Like
Right.
I'll wear camo and like that kind of shit, but like I'm not coming out saying I'm a soldier or a warrior or, it's very much like I'm a guy who's very good at doing what needs to be done.
Okay. So to kind of get back on you, you've kind of started making your contacts to a point, going to uh, wrestle people from the St. Louis, Kansas City area. Um, would you would you say there was like a point in time where you like got your quote unquote break to like really put yourself out there on the independents? Who was the contact you made, or who did you wrestle? Because you've been to quite a few places. One big one in particular we're going to get to here in a few minutes. But do you have kind of that big? And here's where Graham Bell, uh, really started to find his footing in the independent wrestling scene. Do you have that moment, or was it just still kind of
No,
just hustling?
it's always hustling. There have been moments, smaller ones, but there's never been a moment. Cause I mean, I still haven't broken out. Like I'm doing well for myself and everything, but like I'm not a JD Drake or a Daniel Garcia, and I'm not one of these guys that has 7 to 8 matches WrestleMania weekend. And I do want to be that guy. Um, Small stuff. Again, just having Luke there and traveling with him was obviously like the first big step. The biggest paradigm shift was when he had to take time off and I was on my own for the first time. That's when I started traveling with the Hooligans.
Great
And
guy, great talents.
fucking phenomenal. If you are fucking a fan of anything Warhorse does, you can pretty much thank the Hooligans. They taught him to work. They taught me to work. If you're a big Beef fan, a Herzog fan, we're all Hooligan kids. And
Absolutely.
and again, that's basically, they really taught me how to work. They taught me how to be that journeyman. Like in Lawton, I learned how to be in a top tag team and tell stories in front of a crowd. But Hooligans taught me how to go and get over in front of a new crowd. And I'm still not the very best at it, but I'm way better off than, had I not learned that from them. I can make a crowd remember me the first time, if nothing else. But you've probably even seen it at Anna. That Anna crowd didn't really know me when I
Right.
came, and like Murdoch, got a huge pop. And they didn't give a fuck about me. But
Right.
in that match with Murdoch, they sure knew who the fuck I was when I wrestled Mickey.
Yeah.
And now they're gonna know definitely who the fuck I am when I go out there and I wrestle Gary J.
Absolutely.
So
I've had Gary on the show. Gary's also great talent, underrated talent. I'm psyched as fuck for that. We're kind of dating the recording of this. I don't know if it's going to come out before or after that match takes place, but we're definitely pumped up to see you and Gary go at it. Um, so you kind of learn more from the Hooligans, and we might be jumping ahead quite a bit. But the one thing I really wanted to ask you about, because it's something that I didn't know until I looked you up to try and reach out to get an interview with you, was you have actually been to Japan, and you've wrestled for the Wrestle One promotion in Cork and Hall, no less. I have about 1,000 questions related to that. How did you get booked? What's traveling to Japan like? What's wrestling in Japan like? What's Korakuen Hall like? Like Japan. This is the Japan portion of the interview.
for
Take me
sure.
through all that.
Straight up, very simply, I got over there through a tryout system, and Wrestle One did a bunch of tryouts across the country in 2019. And if you passed, they would pay for a week of your training at the dojo. And a week of their training is like $1,500 at the time, which is wild to me. But hey, what the hell? And you still have to fly yourself over there. And so, like, I'm pretty open about, yeah, I flew myself over there, but um, Japan was something I've wanted to do forever. Like that's probably my long-term goal, is to make a living in Japan. But I did the tryout. I got that paid for. They told us
Who
there
ran the
was no.
tryout in the United States?
Oh, Kaz and Sunny. They came
Okay.
over and they toured. Yeah, Kaz Hayashi and Sunny Ono, and because Kaz was president of Wrestle One, but They came over. They did a bunch. My dad paid for my flight over there. I wouldn't have been able to do a lot of things in wrestling if it weren't for my dad having my back and helping me out, and just pretty much making sure that I was able to wrestle a lot of the time. But I did the tryout. Went over there. They told us it's for a week of training. You'll have to do the young boy shit. You'll have to cook and clean and train. And there's no guarantee that you guys are going to get any matches. We'll be straight up. We're not promising you any matches. And we were like, cool. So the first day of training there, we had a couple training matches. They really liked what they saw. They could tell we were workers. So we got on a house show in Odawara. We did fucking killed it in our 6-man.
So,
And then they're like, that was good. So tomorrow night we're gonna put you guys on the pre-show in Corrigan Hall.
so you mentioned the house show in Odawara. What is, because I mean, a lot of the people listening, sometimes when they think Japanese wrestling, they think, Kawasaki Stadium for FMW, or subsequently, or any promotion, not really just FMW, or the Tokyo Dome, or, they think of these big, giant stadiums.
For sure.
And, you mentioned that you're wrestling a house show. What would, like, compare a house show in a smaller venue in a smaller town in Japan? How does that compare to, you just on your travels in the United States, wrestling for whatever indie in Missouri or Fight Underground or Oklahoma or something of that
I mean,
nature?
a Wrestle One house show's about equivalent and kind of presentation to a solid indie show.
Okay.
We were in a rec center gym, and I'd say there's probably about 150 to 200 people there. Not packed, but like a solid crowd. And like, entrance, couple lights, a ring, tarp on the floor, merch set up around the place. That's about it for the house show. And it was super cool. I mean, for one, it was cool because like as far as we knew, that was the only match we had booked in Japan that whole 10 days we were over there. So we were like, man, we're gonna fucking wrestle in Japan. Holy fuck. That's cool. No one can ever take that away from us. And then they told us, well, tomorrow we're gonna put you guys on in Kurikan. And then it's like, well, fucking ain't nobody tell me nothing from now on. Like, it's kind of a cocky thing to be like, yeah, I had one match in Kurikan Hall on a training excursion that I flew myself over for, but they don't just let anyone wrestle in Kurikan Hall.
Right.
Like, fuck you. Like, you can't tell me shit. Maybe I won't be the greatest wrestler that ever lived, but god damn it, I was good enough to wrestle in Kurikan Hall. So
Tapering
put
off of
some
Kurikan
respect on
Hall,
it.
tell me about
Huh?
that. Tapering off of, you mentioned Kurikan Hall. What is that venue like? What is the locker room like? What is that feeling like in Kurikan Hall? If you could encapsulate that for someone, what did that feel like? Just getting ready and just what's it
It
like?
was temple like, shrine like, because it's very intimate and understated, but at the same time, it's everything you want it to be. Like, it's about the size of a big school gymnasium, the place where the actual wrestling takes place. But you feel it when you're in there. Like some places you go and you're like, okay, I know this is Madison Square Garden, or like I know this is Yankee Stadium, but the baseball players aren't here yet, and so it just kind of feels like blah blah blah.
Right.
You feel you're in Kurikan Hall as soon as you walk into Kurikan Hall. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to have the ring up yet or the wrestlers in there, or the crowd, for you to be very aware that you're in Kurikan Hall. And that was very cool. I didn't realize it was attached to the Tokyo Dome, which is wild. But yeah, we went in, like we walked into Tokyo Dome Park, and we took this little elevator, and we just come up, and there it is. And there's those bleachers I've seen 1,000 times. There are those orange seats I've seen 1,000 times. Those rafters I've seen 1,000 times. And man, I'm wrestling in here tonight. And that's fucking cool. Like, career wise, easily the top moment of my career.
Right. Who was on your team, and who did you guys wrestle at Cork and Hall?
It was me, Prince Vale, and the monster Cyrus against uh this guy from California, Blood Eagle. Fuck him, because he's in a stable with Teddy Hart now, and he was an asshole the whole time we were over here. And normally I wouldn't put him on blast like that, but if he's in a stable with Teddy Hart of his own accord in 2021, fuck that guy. So it was Blood Eagle, Trevor Eon, and Trish Adora were our opponents.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen Trish Adora's very famous picture of her hitting the lariat Tubman on me, but that was at that Hurricane Hall show. I think it's pinned to her Twitter profile. It's got like 15,000 likes and some shit. It's dope. But yeah, it was really cool. I didn't know it was that bad at the time, but the night before in Ottawa, I'd broken my foot.
Oh,
because
wow.
I'd done a big moonsault to the outside and I'd landed on my right foot. No one had caught me, and it hurt. The most pain I've probably ever been in for a sustained period of time. And like, you clearly have a knowledge of Japan. You walk everywhere.
Right.
So like, I was getting from platform to platform on a fucking broken foot with 2 bags. So that was not fucking fun. But Trish and Trevor especially were fucking the sweethearts. They helped me carry my bag and shit and made sure I was good. But yeah, I wrapped the shit out of it, iced the shit out of it, took a bunch of ibuprofen before I had my Hurricane Hall match. And with the adrenaline, like, I barely fucking felt it. And I did that moonsault again, and they fucking caught me that time. But I was like, I'm not about to go to Hurricane Hall and not do this moonsault. I'll break the fucking other foot. I don't care.
So you mentioned you were doing a lot of training in the dojo, so I'm guessing that didn't leave a whole hell of a lot of time for, let me take in Tokyo, let me take in Japan. Oh, hey, here's this restaurant that, here's Ribera Steakhouse, here's all
Man,
the other
we had a surprising amount of downtime, actually.
Okay. What did you
Because
do
we
on your
would get up.
downtime? Like, what all did you get to see in Japan during your downtime?
We just kind of walked around some. There were a couple times they went out and I stayed in because my foot was not up for walking around.
Gotcha.
Man, we were in Shinjuku for the most part. That's where we stayed, and that's mostly what we kind of saw. Fucking Sunny took us to the red light district, which was fun to walk around. We walked into some like sex shops and stuff, and just kind of went downtown. We saw the hotel that's got Godzilla on it. Me
Nice.
and Cyrus and my buddy Bill all went to Ribeiro one night, and we didn't. This was right after they stopped giving out the Ribera jackets to everyone. Yes, I was
No.
very upset.
Did they have
I
them for
guess
sale at least? Could you buy one? Or...
Man, there's like a thing. The rumor I heard, and I don't think I buy this, is that they stopped giving them out when all the GCW guys went over there, and like we're taking a bunch of them. But I'm pretty sure they stopped handing them out way before that, because for one, I know several of those GCW guys, and I don't think any of them have Ribera jackets that I know about anyway, that I've seen. But
right.
It's, you got to go like during certain times, and I think like now you have to have like a promoter like vouch for you or something. Like, it's not a just, oh, here you go kind of thing anymore, which I was bummed about. I will get a fucking Ribera Steakhouse jacket before I fucking die. I promise you that. But that was a bummer. But I mean, the food was fucking awesome at Ribera. So we did that. There's a lot of restaurants. We went to the New Japan store. I got my buddy an Ishii shirt, and while we were
Nice.
looking, there's a little staircase corridor that goes up from the ground level to the New Japan store, and there's a big wall that all the wrestlers are signed. And we were just kind of looking at it, finding signatures, and one of the employees comes up to us with some markers, and so we got to sign the wall of the New Japan store.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then Sonny is a big collector, and he took us to see. He's the guy that makes tiger masks.
Okay.
And we got to go see him. We not only got to go in his store, but we got to go back into like his private collection. And like, he gave us his card. Like, he still makes masks and stuff, so that was super cool. And then I think it was the day after our Quirk and Hall show, um, through Sunny, Tatsumi Fujinami had invited the class to his tradition show that the next night. So we went inside, and it was like a 4-match card. And the main event of that show was a 6-man, and it was Muda, Tenzin, and goddamn, I can never remember. See, it was Muda and Tenzin. The other team had Fujinami, some judo guy, and Liger.
Wow. So this
Again,
was this was right before the Liger's retirement.
yes, this was in October
Oh wow.
before he retired in January.
Right.
Um,
Dang.
yeah, it was. See, it was. There's a dude. He does a bunch of hip attacks and wears karate gi pants. It was him, Liger, and Fujinami against Muda, Tenzan, and I can't believe I'm blanking on the fucking last guy. That pisses me off. But Chono was the special referee.
Nice.
And the finish was Chono and Muda hitting a shining mafia kick and a shining wizard combo to Fujinami in the center of the ring. And it was fucking dope.
Nice.
But yeah, it was pretty wild. I was like, man, we're going to get to see Jushin Thunder Liger and Korakuen Hall like 3 months before he retires.
That's yeah. That is just the timing of you getting to go to Japan was just perfect for something like that.
It was
That is
awesome.
awesome. Did you kind of just mainly keep talking to like interacting with Ono, or did you get to meet Muda or any of the other brass at Wrestle One or anything of that nature?
We were very welcomed at the dojo. Like see Kondo, Shuji Kondo was there. We didn't talk with him a lot, but like we hung out with this dude Genseki Tanaka. He ran some of our training classes and he's in 0-1 now. He was super fucking cool. He was the first guy to compliment me on my Japanese because I was so fucking nervous, but I was like, fuck, you gotta try, because that's a big deal over there. If you like make the effort to like try and learn some of their language, they appreciate that. That's what I've been told by friends who've wrestled over there.
Right.
And so I went up and I like asked his name in Japanese, and he goes, "Oh, very, very, very good Japanese." I was like, "Oh, thank you, thank God." Um, him, we got along with their green kids pretty well. These guys, Kai and I can't remember the other one's name off the top of my head, but Kai Fujimura was the guy that kind of took care of us and kind of showed us what all we needed to do in our green boy duties.
Uh,
Um, Go ahead.
well, you mentioned you did you lived the life of a green boy. Um, what is the Japanese training like? What is it like being a green boy? Because you hear all these stories of how hard the life is. What from your perspective? What is that life like?
It wasn't near as hard on us because like they saw us in training that first day and like they knew we were experienced workers coming over to, you know, get extra training and just, improve ourselves. So like, yeah, we would help like clean out the showers and help cook the meals and stuff, but like they didn't rough us up like they did. Like we watched a guy have his young boy training match where they're beating the shit out of him and slamming him extra hard and wrenching the Boston Crab on him. But like the workers very much treated us like workers while we were there.
Gotcha.
And we had a little bit extra reverence like from their young boys too. Like they would show us what we needed to do, but it kind of felt like they treated us like the more veteran wrestlers. So for us, it was pretty chill. We get up in the morning, we do a few chores to help out, and then we train. And the training, it's what you heard about. It's a lot of push-ups and squats and running. And we honestly didn't do a ton of in-ring stuff. One day was just not even so much a grappling class as like they wanted to see among us who had like shoot style experience. But it was, and like, I think it would have been harder if I hadn't spent months and months preparing for that kind of training. Like the tryout that I did was in June, and I'd spent a good 2 months before that getting ready for the tryout.
Right.
And then I had another 3 months before I left to like, I mean, for a solid 2 months, I was doing 500 Hindu squats or the equivalent every day. So I was pretty well prepared for the training.
Awesome. What was your what did you the biggest thing you learned? What's the thing that you learned in Japan that really you're going to use to continue and improve your career going forward?
Hmm. I don't know, man. That's a good question because like the training wasn't anything revolutionary. I didn't learn some crazy new technique or philosophy, that totally morphed how I work. But man, I guess really just what I learned was how much I really want to be in Japan and wrestle in
Okay.
Japan in front of crowds that appreciate wrestling. And I like the Japanese culture in of itself. I'm a little loud and obnoxious for that culture, but their whole thing is like, you just don't be a burden to other people. You walk on Tokyo, the most like densely populated city in the world. There are no trash cans and there's no trash anywhere on the street. And that just kind of speaks to like, you take care of your shit. Like they were the first country to have like live events back
Right.
because everyone just said like, hey, now we all need to wear our masks. And they're like, okay, we're all going to wear our masks. And then it's like, okay, now we're going to come back inside, but we all need to wear our masks and we need to not shout. And like, there was never a government mandated like mask mandate or lockdown in Japan because everyone just said, this is what we need to do.
Right.
And they did it. And I like that. And that's what wrestling needs to be because ultimately, it's a community. You have to have an undercard and a main event, and you have to have an undercard that doesn't step on the main event, and you have to have a main event that builds off the undercard, and you have to have guys in between that complement each other and aren't taking away from other things on the show, and everyone's working together to present a profitable product. But I you know I it really kind of showed me because right now WWE isn't my ultimate goal. I don't think I'd be a good fit there for a few reasons. And it doesn't seem to have the creative freedom that I would really like and really appreciate on the independents. AEW would be cool, but they're pretty chock-a-block right now, full of guys. And so like Japan is like, I like the idea of like going over there for 8 weeks and wrestling and making my money and then coming home and spending time with my family and doing indies on the weekends for 8 weeks. And that's a life I'd be super fucking happy to have. I don't need to have John Cena money. If I can make a comfortable living off wrestling and get to wrestle for the rest of my life, I'll be happy.
That's awesome. And I certainly wish you the best of luck in doing that. I would love to see you go back to Japan and love to see you just get to go be part of New Japan or be part of Noah. I don't know what the hierarchy system is for anything like that, but I definitely hope that you get that because you seem really, really driven for that goal of Japan. Switching gears slightly, just because this is another personal question, but it's also how I got introduced to you. How did you hear about Fight Underground, and what do you think of Anna Fight Underground so far?
Oh, Zach Summers hit me up. Zach Sawyer, he hit me up before they had any dates really set. Maybe they had their first show, but that Zach hit me up. Like I was very honored that I was one of the first people he contacted, and I told him I don't think I realized quite at the time the kind of stock he put in me, but put me in there with Murdoch the first show, put me in there with Mickey, and then Gary now. And I know a couple of the things I've got coming up that I won't say yet,
Right.
but I've talked with him about it. Like, right. Like I kind of consider Anna Fight like my home right now because
Okay.
they're like one of the first promotions that's put any kind of real stock in me. Like I said, I've been the mercenary for a long time, going here and there where I'm needed, doing the job, and then leaving because that's all anyone really ever saw me as. Zach saw me as a main guy, as a top tier guy. Like, it shouldn't have taken this long for someone to book Gary J versus Graham Bell. Like, that's been a no brainer for a couple fucking years now, and no one's done it. And for Zach to do that, and it's kind of become a running joke that I've decided is done being a joke, and it's just going to be the fucking truth from now on. Mikey told me, we were talking at a show in Tennessee, and they were throwing out all these names. And I was like, well, or they threw out a certain name. I was like, well, who would they work? He's like, you. I was like, oh, that'd be fucking dope. I was like, Mikey, was telling me, he's like, that's what I tell Zach anytime he talks about bringing someone, we bring someone in. I'll pitch someone and Zach go, who do you work? I was like, it's got to be Graham. It has to be Graham. And we made that a joke for a while, but I've decided, like, yeah, man, it does have to be me. From now on, it has to be me. There are no other options. I'm not allowing any other options anymore. And like Anna's the place that I'm going to show people that it has to be me from now on. There's no alternatives. There's no better option. If you want the very fucking best in professional wrestling, it has to be Graham.
Wow. And I definitely see you in that role, because that's especially after the match with Mickey. I think that was a pretty epic main event, because it was a great show, but I was like, it was a long show, and I'm here like, I'm getting tired. And then
For sure.
you and Mickey did a great job, and made me go like, well, I got to sit through this because they're kicking ass, and there's no reason to leave before the main event when Graham Bell's the main event.
And Zach put a lot of faith in me being the main event on that show that he knew was going to be long. But again, it's like, well, there's got to be a main event on this show. Who's it going to be? Has to be Graham. Has to be.
So we'll close the interview off with this. You mentioned, just a minute ago, your ultimate goal is Japan, maybe AEW, but here in 2021, where we're just kind of now getting out of the pandemic stage, and you know, what are your goals for 2021, 2022?
Pit fighter.
Okay.
100% pit fighter.
What is Pit Fighter for those that don't know?
So Pit Fighter is an offshoot of ICW No Holds Bar that I believe is an offshoot of just ICW to begin with. So ICW No Holds Bar is I wouldn't even just call them a straight up deathmatch company. They're a hardcore no rules company that has chains instead of ropes, and they specialize in fights as opposed to wrestling matches necessarily. They get the toughest motherfuckers out there to come in and have killer fights. Pit Fighter, as an extension of that, is where they take away the ring and they put up a cage wall. And as they say, in the pit, we just fucking fight. It's there are pinfalls allowed, but it's knockout pinfall submission. You can go outside the cage. The use of weapons is highly encouraged. And it's got, Pit Fighters had guys I've never heard of that I don't think would get booked anywhere else, to the best people on the planet, and guys like Brett Eisen and John Wayne Murdoch.
Okay, so Pit Fighter, is that the ultimate goal, or is that something
That's the immediate goal?
Immediate goal. Okay.
I'd really love when St. Louis Anarchy comes back to get in there as a singles guy. We'll see how that goes.
I just want St. Louis Anarchy back.
Yeah, 100%. I love St. Louis Anarchy. I think this match with Gary can go a long way in that. I get along perfectly fine with Matt Jackson. He seemed for a long time to
Matt Jackson from St. Louis, not the Young Buck, even though Matt Jackson from St. Louis is cool as fuck too, for those that are not from this area.
Yes, Matt Jackson, the promoter of St. Louis Anarchy, who for a long time I've always gotten along with, has not really seemed to be sold on me as a St. Louis Anarchy guy, and it's a little bit of a point of pride to change his mind about that. And I think because he's a guy who I do believe is open to having his mind changed. He's not just some asshole who's going to write you off forever.
Right.
So I really plan to do that. I think the Gary J match will be a huge step towards that. But that's another goal with Pit Fighter is earning a spot in St. Louis Anarchy as a singles wrestler, because we've been there as a tag team, and that was right before shutdown, and so we didn't get to kind of ride that wave as much as we would have liked. But St. Louis Anarchy, there's some stuff going on in Texas I'm going to work my way into, and just slowly, I just want to build my name. I don't necessarily need a big breakout moment, like you talked about earlier. I don't need that one thing. Like, I'm just gonna fucking show people that for the past 10 years, and at the end of June it'll be 10 years I've been wrestling till now. It has to be Graham. You guys have fucked up by it not being me up till now, but from now on it has to be me. There are no other options now. I'm taking them off the table.
Well, I certainly appreciate your time today. I certainly appreciate hearing about your journey, and I'm uh, really looking forward to seeing where your career goes. I hope you get back to Japan. I definitely want to check out Pit Fighter now, and definitely hope you get
Man,
booked
check
on
it out
those.
on IWTV. They got a lot of ICW Pit Fighter.
I definitely will, and hopefully when St.
Some of
Louis,
them featuring Gary J.
yes, uh, Gary J is always a plus to everything, and definitely hoping to
Always.
get you back into St. Louis Anarchy. So, in addition to Fight Underground, I can go see you there. Do you have any social media for someone who might want to see what you're about, check out your matches, anything of that nature? If someone never heard of Graham Bell, would like to check you
Graham
out.
Bell on Facebook. I'm Instagram 5580 on Instagram. I haven't posted there in forever. I am at Merc with a main on Twitter and Merc with a snap on Snapchat.
Awesome. Uh, Appreciate your time once again. Thank you so much for doing this, and
It was good talking to you, man.
you too. And if the listeners enjoyed this, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the comic books, gaming, anime, and all things geek culture. You can follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeeka9, Twitter athletic_geeka9, Instagram at athleticgeeka9. And if you'd like to help improve this channel financially, I am on Patreon. Patreon.com/athleticgeeking9. Definitely check out Graham Bell. I don't know if this will be before the next Anafied Underground show, but if you are in the area, definitely, and this is definitely check out Anafied Underground.
Check out all their shows. They're
Check out all
fucking killing it.
independentwrestling.tv. Check them out, and if this goes up before the show, they are going to be back at Quick Skating Rink on April the 29th. That's when the Gary J match will happen, or maybe it would have already happened. But either way, definitely check them out. And
I do believe their June date is June the 23rd. It's the last Thursday in June. So if this does go up after the Gary J match, hold on, I'll check my calendar for you real quick.
let's do it.
June the 24th.
June the 24th. Okay, so June the 24th. If you're in the area or just want to check it out,
Make the drive.
Feel like a road
Make the
trip
fucking drive.
to Anna, Illinois. I don't know how many people have ever said, let's go on a road trip to Anna, Illinois before, but let's.
They got a reason to now.
They got a reason to now, but check out Fight Underground, check out Graham Bell, and we'll see y'all next time.